Indigent child finds documents of a millionaire when he said what he wanted in exchange. The sun hung high over Seattle, casting warm golden rays across the sprawling lawns and bustling playgrounds of Beacon Hill Park. Jimmy, a scrappy 10-year-old with tousled hair and wide, curious eyes, wandered barefoot along the pathways. His tattered clothes told a story of hardship, but his vibrant energy and determination masked any sign of despair. The park was his sanctuary, a world of freedom away from the cramped garage he shared with his single mother. While other kids played on the swings or ran under the watchful eyes of their parents, Jimmy had his own adventures, scavenging for small treasures, shiny rocks, bottle caps, and anything that might hold a secret worth uncovering. On this particular afternoon, Jimmy's life was about to take an unexpected turn. Near a weathered bench, nestled under a patch of tall grass, something caught his eye. It was a sleek leather briefcase, its rich brown surface glinting faintly in the sunlight. Jimmy hesitated, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. When the coast was clear, he approached cautiously, kneeling down to inspect the mysterious find. The briefcase was smooth to the touch, its brass clasp shining like a hidden gem. Heart pounding with curiosity, Jimmy carefully undid the latch and opened it. Inside was an assortment of documents, all meticulously organized. There was a passport, credit cards, and what appeared to be legal contracts, though the words were far beyond his understanding. On one crisp, embossed business card, a name stood out in bold gold letters: Michael Whitmore. Jimmy's breath hitched. He had heard that name before. Michael Whitmore was a towering figure in Seattle, a billionaire whose name adorned skyscrapers and exclusive restaurants Jimmy had only seen from the outside. "What's this doing here?" he whispered, his eyes darting back and forth between the papers and the empty park around him. Among the contents, one particular object glimmered: a jet-black credit card. It was unlike anything Jimmy had ever seen, exuding a sense of power and exclusivity. This must be worth a fortune, he thought, his mind racing with possibilities. But Jimmy wasn't a thief. He knew returning the briefcase was the right thing to do. Still, a daring idea began to form in his mind. What if this was his chance? Not for money, but for something bigger. As he tucked the briefcase under his arm, hiding it beneath his jacket, a familiar voice broke his train of thought. "Jimmy, what you got there?" Ellie asked, jogging up to him. Ellie was his closest friend, a sharp, witty 11-year-old with a head full of curly hair and a backpack always bursting with books. She peered curiously at the briefcase as Jimmy reluctantly revealed it. "Found it under that bench," he explained, flipping it open just enough for her to see the name on the documents. Her eyes widened. "Michael Whitmore? Jimmy, that's huge. We've got to take it to the police or something." Jimmy hesitated, closing the briefcase. "Yeah, we could. But what if? What if this could be something else?" "Something else?" Ellie echoed, frowning in confusion. "What do you mean?" Jimmy's gaze wandered toward the horizon, as if he could already see the future waiting for him. "I don't know yet, but I think this could change everything. Not just for me, but for us." Ellie crossed her arms, skeptical but intrigued. "You're crazy, you know that?" Jimmy grinned. "Maybe, but what if I'm right?" Later that evening, Jimmy and Ellie sat on the worn steps outside the garage Jimmy called home. The briefcase rested between them, its polished surface gleaming faintly under the dim streetlights. Jimmy fiddled with a loose thread on his shirt, while Ellie watched him closely, her arms hugging her knees. "You're really not going to take it to the police?" she asked, breaking the silence. Jimmy shook his head, his gaze fixed on the briefcase. "I've been thinking about it all day. What if we just give it back to Whitmore ourselves? If we hand it over in person, maybe he'll listen to me." Ellie frowned. "Listen to what?" "Jimmy, people like him don't talk to kids like us. You know that." Jimmy looked up at her, his expression firm. "That's what everyone thinks, Ellie. But if we just hand this to the police, it's over. Someone else will take credit for it, and we'll go back to being invisible." Ellie bit her lip, her skepticism softening into concern. "So, what's your plan, genius? Just walk up to his giant office tower and ask to see the richest man in Seattle?" Jimmy shrugged. "Pretty much." "That's crazy," Ellie said, though the faintest smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "You're going to get us kicked out before we even get through the door." Maybe, Jimmy admitted. But what if we don't? What if he listens? He's got everything, Ellie. And I don't want money. I want him to show me how to have what he has. Ellie's eyebrows shot up. What does that even mean? Jimmy stood and paced a few steps, trying to put his thoughts into words. He didn't just wake up rich one day. He worked for it, right? He figured out how to do something big, to make something of himself. I want to learn how to do that. I want to give my mom something better than this. He gestured toward the garage with a note of determination in his voice. Ellie sighed, running her fingers through her curls. You're serious about this, huh? Jimmy nodded. Dead serious. For a moment, they sat in silence, the hum of distant traffic filling the air. Finally, Ellie spoke. All right, I'm in. But if this backfires and we end up on the news as a pair of dumb kids trying to break into some billionaire's office, it's on you. Jimmy grinned. Deal. The next morning, armed with the briefcase and a shaky sense of confidence, Jimmy and Ellie made their way to the towering Whitmore Corporation building downtown. The skyscraper seemed to pierce the sky, its sleek, mirrored facade reflecting the bustling streets below. Standing in the grand lobby, Jimmy suddenly felt very small. The marble floors, towering pillars, and bustling professionals in tailored suits were a world away from his reality. He clutched the briefcase tighter, glancing at Ellie, who was scanning the room with wide eyes. Now what? She whispered. Jimmy spotted a security desk near the elevators. We tell them we found something that belongs to Mr. Whitmore. They'll let us talk to him. Ellie snorted. Yeah, right. These people won't even let us near the elevators. But Jimmy was already marching toward the desk. He approached the security guard, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a sharp gaze. Excuse me, Jimmy said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. We need to see Mr. Whitmore. It's important. The guard raised an eyebrow, glancing at Jimmy and Ellie's worn clothes before eyeing the briefcase. Do you have an appointment? Jimmy shook his head. No, but this belongs to him. It's important. The guard's skepticism deepened. Kids, Mr. Whitmore is a very busy man. If you've got something for him, leave it here, and we'll make sure it gets to him. No. Jimmy blurted, surprising even himself. We have to give it to him personally. It's not just some lost wallet or phone. It's bigger than that. The guard's expression hardened. Listen, kid. Let them through. The voice came from behind them, calm but commanding. Jimmy and Ellie turned to see a man in an impeccably tailored suit approaching. His salt and pepper hair and sharp features made him look important, though not quite as imposing as Jimmy had imagined Michael Whitmore would be. Mr. Whitmore? Jimmy asked hesitantly. The man smiled faintly. No, but close. I'm Mr. Whitmore's assistant, and I think he'll want to hear what you have to say. Jimmy and Ellie followed Mr. Whitmore's assistant, a man who introduced himself as Mr. Callahan, through a labyrinth of gleaming hallways and glass-walled conference rooms. The contrast between their scuffed shoes and the polished marble floors felt glaring, but Jimmy held the briefcase tightly, his determination outweighing any intimidation. Ellie nudged Jimmy. You sure about this? It's not too late to bail. Jimmy glanced at her, his grip tightening. We've come this far. They stopped outside a massive oak door with Michael Whitmore, CEO, etched on a brass plaque. Callahan knocked twice, then pushed the door open. Inside was a sprawling office that screamed power and elegance. The walls were lined with bookshelves, their shelves crammed with leather-bound volumes and awards. A sleek desk sat by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of Seattle's skyline. Behind the desk, a man stood, his posture commanding yet not unkind. Michael Whitmore was tall, with neatly combed silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to assess Jimmy and Ellie in a single glance. His tailored suit fit him like armor, yet his expression betrayed curiosity. What do we have here, Callahan? Whitmore asked, his voice smooth but edged with authority. Callahan gestured to the kids. These two found something of yours, sir. They insisted on delivering it to you personally. Whitmore's eyes flicked to the briefcase in Jimmy's hands. Is that so? He walked around his desk, his gaze sharp but not unfriendly. Let's see it. Jimmy stepped forward and extended the briefcase. Whitmore took it, his brow furrowing as he opened it. A brief silence hung in the room as he examined its contents. Well, Whitmore finally said, closing the briefcase with a snap. This is quite the find. I'd wondered where it went. How did you come across it? Jimmy hesitated, then said, I found it in the park. It was just lying there under a bench. Ellie interjected. We thought about just giving it to the police, but Jimmy thought it'd be better to bring it to you. Whitmore's eyes lingered on Jimmy, a glimmer of intrigue in his expression. That's very honest of you. I suppose you'd like a reward. Ellie opened her mouth, but Jimmy spoke first. No, sir. I don't want money. Whitmore raised an eyebrow. Oh, then what do you want? Jimmy took a deep breath, his palms sweating despite the cool air in the room. I want you to teach me. I want to learn how you did it. How you became you. The room fell silent. Ellie shot Jimmy a look of disbelief, but Whitmore didn't seem surprised. Instead, he leaned back against his desk, arms crossed, studying Jimmy with an intensity that made the boy squirm. That's an unusual request, Whitmore said, his tone thoughtful. Most people just ask for cash or something flashy. Jimmy met his gaze, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. Money doesn't last, but if I know how to succeed like you, I can help my mom and give us a better life. For a moment, Whitmore said nothing. Then, to everyone's surprise, he chuckled, a low, genuine sound that echoed through the office. Well, you've got guts, I'll give you that, he said. But success isn't something you can just learn in a day. It's earned through hard work, discipline, and resilience. Why should I waste my time on you? Jimmy didn't flinch. Because I won't waste it. I'll work hard. I'll do whatever it takes. Whitmore regarded him for a long moment, then turned to Callahan. Clear my schedule for Saturday mornings. Let's see what the boy is made of. Callahan's eyebrows shot up, but he nodded. Yes, sir. Jimmy blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Wait, you mean, you'll do it? Whitmore's lips curved into a faint smile. I'll give you a chance. But only one. Show me you're serious, and maybe you'll learn something. Waste my time, and this ends immediately. Understood. Jimmy nodded fervently. Yes, sir. I won't let you down. Whitmore extended a hand, and Jimmy shook it with a firm grip, his heart swelling with determination. As they left the office, Ellie tugged at his sleeve. Did that just happen? Jimmy grinned. I think it did. The days leading up to Saturday passed in a blur of anticipation and nerves for Jimmy. Every evening, he paced the small garage he and his mom called home, practicing what he might say or do in front of Michael Whitmore. Ellie, true to her word, stuck by his side, though her skepticism hadn't completely faded. Are you really ready for this? She asked one afternoon, as they walked through the park where it had all started. Jimmy kicked a stray pebble, watching it skid across the pavement. I don't know if I'm ready, Ellie, but I can't waste this chance. Ellie smirked. Well, if you trip over your words or faint, I'll make sure to laugh quietly. Jimmy shot her a mock glare. Gee, thanks for the support. Finally, Saturday arrived, dressed in his cleanest shirt and jeans, though still a little too big for his frame. Jimmy arrived at Whitmore Corporation with Ellie trailing behind. She'd refused to miss the moment. Are you sure it's okay if I come? She whispered as they stood outside the gleaming glass doors. Jimmy shrugged. He didn't say you couldn't. As they entered, the receptionist looked at them with mild surprise, but didn't stop them. Callahan appeared a moment later, as punctual and polished as ever. Right on time, he said, nodding in approval. Follow me. The two kids followed him up an elevator that seemed to rise endlessly before opening to Whitmore's private office floor. This time, Whitmore was already waiting, leaning casually against his desk. You're here, he said simply, his sharp gaze flicking to Ellie. And you brought backup. Jimmy cleared his throat nervously. This is Ellie. She's my best friend. She wanted to come, and I didn't think you'd mind. Whitmore studied Ellie for a moment before nodding. Fair enough. She can stay, for now. Ellie stiffened, unsure whether to feel flattered or offended. Whitmore straightened and gestured for Jimmy to step forward. All right, kid. You said you wanted to learn. Let's start with the basics. What is it you want? Not just today, not just this week. What do you want in life? Jimmy blinked, startled by the directness of the question. He looked at Whitmore, then at Ellie, before finally finding his voice. I want to take care of my mom, he said. I want us to live somewhere better, where she doesn't have to work 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. I want to build something real, something I can be proud of. Whitmore nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. That's a start. Now tell me, why do you think you can do it? What makes you different from everyone else who wants the same thing? Jimmy hesitated, glancing at Ellie, who gave him a slight nod of encouragement. He took a deep breath. Because I'm not afraid to work for it, he said. I know I don't have the kind of life most people do. I know what it's like to go without. But that just makes me want it more. I'll do whatever it takes. Whitmore tilted his head, a small, approving smile playing on his lips. Good answer. Ellie's jaw dropped slightly, but she quickly composed herself. Whitmore gestured to a stack of files on his desk. Success isn't just about working hard, though. It's about working smart. Knowing what to do, when to do it, and why it matters. Starting today, you'll come here every Saturday. I'll give you a task each week. If you complete it, you come back. If you fail, you're out. Understand? Jimmy nodded quickly. Yes, sir. I understand. Whitmore leaned forward, his piercing blue eyes locking on Jimmy's. Good. Because the first task starts now. He handed Jimmy a small notebook and a pen. I want you to spend the next week observing everything around you. Your neighborhood, the people, the way things work. Take notes. Bring me 3 things you notice that most people miss. Then we'll talk about why those things matter. Jimmy frowned, unsure what to make of the assignment. That's it. Whitmore chuckled. That's it. But don't underestimate the importance of paying attention, Jimmy. Most people miss the obvious because they're too distracted. I need to see if you've got the eye for detail. Jimmy pocketed the notebook, determination flickering in his eyes. I won't let you down. Whitmore smiled faintly. We'll see. As Callahan escorted them back to the elevator, Ellie finally broke her silence. Okay, I'll admit it, that was kind of cool. But what did he mean by things people miss? What are you even supposed to write about? Jimmy looked down at the notebook in his hands, his mind already racing. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. The following week, Jimmy carried the small notebook everywhere he went, its blank pages quickly filling with his observations. He scribbled furiously on the city bus, jotted notes while sitting on the curb outside the grocery store, and even woke up in the middle of the night to write down ideas. Ellie tagged along whenever she could, offering her 2 cents, sometimes helpful, sometimes sarcastic. So, Ellie asked one afternoon as they sat on the park swings, what's the big discovery so far? Jimmy flipped through the pages, scanning his own messy handwriting. There's this guy at the corner store. He always gives candy to kids who look like they can't afford it, but he hides it like he doesn't want anyone to know. Ellie tilted her head. Okay, that's sweet, but why does it matter? Jimmy frowned, tapping his pen against the page. I don't know yet. It's just something I noticed. Whitmore said to find things other people miss, right? Ellie shrugged. I guess. Got anything else? Jimmy pointed to another note. There's a guy who comes to the laundromat every Tuesday night. He washes a ton of uniforms. I asked him about it, and he said he runs a cleaning service, but he doesn't have his own machines. So he uses the ones at the laundromat to save money. Ellie raised her eyebrows. That's kind of smart. Exactly. Jimmy said, his excitement building. It's not just about what people miss. It's about how they make things work, even when the odds are against them. By Saturday morning, Jimmy felt ready. With his notebook clutched tightly in his hands, he and Ellie once again walked through the towering glass doors of Whitmore Corporation. I still can't believe he's actually giving you a chance, Ellie whispered as they waited for the elevator. You know, this is like the craziest thing ever, right? Jimmy grinned nervously. Yeah, but crazy might be what I'm good at. When they entered Whitmore's office, the billionaire was seated behind his desk, reading over a stack of papers. He looked up as they walked in, his piercing eyes immediately locking onto Jimmy. You're back, Whitmore said, setting the papers aside. That's a good start. Did you complete the assignment? Jimmy stepped forward and handed over the notebook. I did. 3 things people miss. Whitmore opened the notebook and began flipping through the pages. His expression remained unreadable as he scanned Jimmy's notes. Ellie fidgeted nervously, but Jimmy stood still, his hands clenched at his sides. Finally, Whitmore looked up. The man giving away candy to kids who can't afford it. That shows empathy, an understanding of what people need. even when they don't ask for it. That's an important trait in business. Jimmy blinked, surprised. It is. Whitmore nodded. Good leaders anticipate needs. They think about others, not just themselves. Now the laundromat owner. That one's smart, resourceful. He's saving costs by working with what he has, even if it's inconvenient. Resourcefulness is critical when you're starting out. Whitmore closed the notebook and set it down. You've got an eye for details, Jimmy. That's something most people overlook. Jimmy's chest swelled with pride, but Whitmore's expression grew serious. However, he said, noticing things isn't enough. The real question is, what do you do with that knowledge? Jimmy hesitated. What do you mean? Whitmore leaned forward, his sharp gaze unrelenting. Let me make this clear. Success isn't just about seeing opportunities. It's about acting on them. You noticed the laundromat owner saving costs. But did you think about how his business could grow? Did you wonder how the candy store owner's kindness could build loyalty and drive sales? Jimmy's excitement faltered. I didn't. I guess I didn't think about that. Whitmore's tone softened slightly. That's okay. You're learning. But if you want to succeed, you need to take the next step. Think beyond what's in front of you. So here's your next assignment. Come back with one actionable idea. Something that could help one of these people improve their situation. Understand? Jimmy nodded slowly. I understand. Whitmore leaned back, a faint smile playing on his lips. Good. Now go. Let's see what you come up with. As they left the office, Ellie gave Jimmy a playful shove. Looks like the genius has homework again. Jimmy laughed, though his mind was already racing with possibilities. Yeah, but this time, I'm going to figure it out. I have to. The weight of Whitmore's challenge settled heavily on Jimmy's shoulders as he walked home that day. Ellie tried to lighten the mood with jokes, but Jimmy's mind was focused. One actionable idea, something that could genuinely help. It felt like solving a riddle where the stakes were impossibly high. Back at the garage, Jimmy sat cross-legged on the floor, his notebook open in front of him. He flipped through the pages, rereading every observation he'd made. The candy store owner's quiet generosity, the laundromat entrepreneur's cost-saving methods. Both stories were meaningful, but how could he turn either into a real solution? By evening, Ellie had joined him, sprawled out on the floor with a bag of chips. So, Mr. Future Billionaire, she said between bites, any brilliant ideas yet? Jimmy sighed, tossing his pen down. No, everything I think of feels small, like it's not good enough. Ellie shrugged. Maybe you're overthinking it. Didn't Whitmore say something about resourcefulness? Start there. Jimmy stared at her, then at the notebook. Resourcefulness, suddenly an idea began to form. The laundromat guy, he said, sitting up straighter. He washes all those uniforms, but it takes him forever because he doesn't have his own machines. What if he could get his own machines? Ellie frowned. Jimmy, those things cost a fortune. How's he supposed to do that? Jimmy grabbed his pen, scribbling furiously. What if he talks to the laundromat owner? They're already making money from him using the machines, right? What if they team up? The laundromat owner could invest in better machines. And in return, the cleaning guy could bring in more business, like uniforms from other companies. They'd both win. Ellie blinked, impressed despite herself. Okay, that's actually kind of smart. But do you think they'd go for it? Jimmy grinned. Only one way to find out. The next day, Jimmy went to the laundromat, waiting for the man to arrive with his weekly haul of uniforms. He introduced himself nervously, explaining his idea as best he could. The man, his name was Mr. Reyes, listened with growing interest. That's an interesting thought, kid, Mr. Reyes said, scratching his chin. Never considered asking the owner for something like that. You really think it could work? Jimmy nodded eagerly. If you both work together, you could grow your business and save money in the long run. Mr. Reyes smiled, clapping Jimmy on the shoulder. You've got a good head on your shoulders. I'll think about it. That night, Jimmy felt a spark of hope. He didn't know if Mr. Reyes would act on the idea, but he'd tried. And that had to count for something. When Saturday came, Jimmy stood in Whitmore's office once again, his notebook in hand. Whitmore gestured for him to sit. So, Whitmore said, his tone expectant, what do you have for me this week? Jimmy launched into his explanation, describing the laundromat idea in detail. Whitmore listened intently, his expression unreadable. When Jimmy finished, there was a long pause. "That's a solid idea," Whitmore finally said. "It's simple, actionable, and benefits everyone involved." "Well done." Jimmy's heart soared, but Whitmore wasn't finished. "Now tell me this," Whitmore said, leaning forward. "Why do you think this matters? Why does helping someone like Mr. Reyes make a difference?" Jimmy hesitated. "Because if people work together, they can do more. They don't have to struggle alone." Whitmore nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Exactly. Collaboration is one of the most powerful tools in business and in life. Don't forget that." Jimmy felt a rush of pride, but before he could fully process Whitmore's praise, the billionaire leaned back in his chair, his expression turning serious. "Now for your next challenge," Whitmore said. "You've shown me you can solve a problem for someone else. But can you solve one for yourself?" Jimmy blinked. "What do you mean?" Whitmore's gaze was piercing. "You told me you want a better life for you and your mom. Start thinking about what you can do to make that happen. I don't mean someday, I mean now. Bring me a plan next week. Something you can act on immediately to improve your situation." Jimmy's confidence wavered. "But I don't have anything. We don't have money or connections or—" Whitmore held up a hand, silencing him. "No excuses. Success starts with what you have, not what you don't. Figure it out." As Jimmy and Ellie left the office, the weight of the new challenge pressed down on him. "You okay?" Ellie asked, her tone unusually gentle. Jimmy nodded slowly. "I think so. I don't know where to start." Ellie smirked. "Well, lucky for you, you've got me. Let's figure it out together." Jimmy smiled faintly, grateful for her support. "Thanks, Ellie. I think I'm going to need it." The week ahead was one of the hardest Jimmy had ever faced. Unlike the previous assignments, where he observed others and came up with ideas for their problems, this task felt much more personal. Whitmore's words echoed in his mind. Success starts with what you have, not what you don't. But what did Jimmy have? His home was a cramped garage, his mother worked endless shifts just to scrape by, and all he owned was a notebook filled with scribbles. How could he possibly turn that into a plan? Ellie sat across from him at the park, munching on an apple. "So we're brainstorming, right? Let's think. What are you good at, Jimmy?" Jimmy shrugged, frustrated. "I don't know. I guess I'm good at noticing stuff. But that's not exactly useful right now." Ellie rolled her eyes. "Noticing stuff is how you came up with the laundromat idea. Don't sell yourself short. Think about what you've seen around here. Something you can actually do." Jimmy's mind wandered back to his notes. His neighborhood was full of people struggling to make ends meet, just like him. Then an idea began to take shape. What if Jimmy started hesitating? Ellie leaned in. What if what? What if I start helping people with stuff they can't do themselves? Like Mr. Reyes. He didn't have time to figure out how to talk to the laundromat owner, but I did. What if I did that for other people? Help them figure out solutions. Ellie squinted. "So you're like a problem solver for hire?" Jimmy grinned. "Yeah. I mean, I don't have much, but I've got my notebook and time. Maybe someone needs help finding a way to save money, or someone else needs ideas for a small business. I could do that." Ellie tilted her head, intrigued. "Okay, it's kind of a weird idea, but it's not bad. How are you going to tell people about it?" Jimmy paused, then smacked his forehead. "Flyers. I'll write flyers and hand them out around the neighborhood." The next day, Jimmy got to work. He borrowed paper and markers from a kind neighbor and spent hours crafting simple, handwritten flyers that read, "Got a problem? Let me help. I'll brainstorm ideas to save money, grow your business, or solve everyday challenges. Payment. Pay what you can." He and Ellie spent an afternoon taping the flyers to lampposts, bus stops, and community boards. By the end of the day, Jimmy was exhausted but hopeful. The first call came 2 days later. A woman named Mrs. Harper needed help figuring out how to sell her homemade candles without spending too much on materials. Jimmy spent hours researching ways to cut costs and suggested she buy supplies in bulk and offer discounts to loyal customers. Mrs. Harper was thrilled, slipping him $5 as thanks. Soon word spread. Mr. Daniels, a retired mechanic, needed help organizing a garage sale. Jimmy helped him advertise it around the neighborhood, and it was a huge success. By the end of the week, Jimmy had helped 4 people and earned $25. Not a fortune, but enough to feel like he was making a difference. On Saturday, Jimmy arrived at Whitmore's office with a mixture of pride and nerves. Ellie stayed behind this time, insisting that this was Jimmy's moment to shine. Whitmore greeted him with his usual calm demeanor, gesturing for Jimmy to sit. "Let's hear it. What did you come up with?" Jimmy took a deep breath and explained his idea, describing how he'd started helping people in his neighborhood and how it was beginning to pay off. Not just in money, but in the way it brought the community together. When he finished, Whitmore leaned back, his expression unreadable as always. "You took what you had, your observations, your time, and turned it into something valuable. That's impressive." Jimmy's heart swelled, but Whitmore wasn't finished. However, Whitmore continued, "This is just the beginning. You've proven you can start something, but the question is, can you grow it?" Success isn't about starting strong. It's about sustaining it over time. That's your next challenge. Jimmy nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. "I can do it. I'll find a way." Whitmore's lips curved into a faint smile. "I believe you can. But remember, growth requires more than hard work. It takes strategy, focus, and sometimes the courage to ask for help. Come back next week with a plan to take your idea to the next level." As Jimmy left the office, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead was daunting, but for the first time, he truly believed he could carve out a better future. For himself, for his mom, and for his community. Jimmy spent the next week pouring himself into the challenge. Whitmore's words rang in his ears. Success isn't about starting strong. It's about sustaining it over time. Sustaining meant growth, and growth meant thinking bigger than he ever had before. But as Jimmy's mind raced with plans and ideas, his friendship with Ellie started to show signs of strain. She had been by his side through every step of his journey, but recently, Jimmy had been so absorbed in his tasks that he barely noticed when Ellie didn't join him at the park or skip their usual hangouts. It wasn't until Wednesday evening, when Jimmy returned to the garage to find Ellie waiting for him, arms crossed and wearing an expression he'd never seen before, frustration. "Hey, Ellie," Jimmy said, setting down his notebook. "What's up?" Ellie frowned. "That's it? That's all you've got to say?" Jimmy blinked, confused. Yeah? Did I miss something?" Ellie threw her hands up. "You missed everything, Jimmy. I've been here, helping you from the start. And now, you're so caught up in this Whitmore thing that you don't even notice when I'm not around." Jimmy opened his mouth to respond but stopped. Ellie's words hit harder than he expected. She was right, he hadn't noticed. "I'm sorry," Jimmy said, his voice quiet. "I didn't mean to push you away. I guess I got so focused on proving myself to Whitmore that I forgot who's been in my corner this whole time." Ellie sighed, her shoulders relaxing a little. "I get it, Jimmy. I know this is a big deal for you, but you're not doing this alone, okay? I've got your back. Just don't forget that." Jimmy smiled sheepishly. "I won't. Promise." Ellie grinned, the tension breaking. "Good. Now tell me what crazy idea you're working on this time." Jimmy pulled out his notebook, and they spent the evening brainstorming ways to grow his fledgling problem-solving business. By the end of the week, Jimmy had a plan. On Saturday, Jimmy entered Whitmore's office with a confidence he hadn't felt before. He held his notebook tightly, ready to present his ideas. Whitmore, as always, was calm and composed as he gestured for Jimmy to sit. "Let's hear it," he said. Jimmy took a deep breath. "I've been helping people in my neighborhood, and it's been going well. But if I want to grow, I need to reach more people. My plan is to create a team of kids like me, people who notice things, who want to help. We could cover more ground, help more people, and split the work so it's not all on me." Whitmore raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. And how do you plan to find these kids?" "I'll start with people I know," Jimmy said. "Like Ellie, she's already helped me a ton. And I'll talk to others who've seen what we're doing. Once we have a small team, we can take on bigger projects." Whitmore nodded slowly, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You've got the right idea, Jimmy. Growth isn't just about scaling up. It's about building the right foundation. But remember, Leading a team isn't easy. It requires trust, communication, and the ability to inspire others. Jimmy nodded. I think I can do that. And if I mess up, I'll figure it out. Whitmore chuckled. Good answer. Now go. Let's see how far you can take this. As Jimmy left the office, his notebook in hand and Ellie waiting for him outside, he felt something new, a sense of purpose that stretched beyond himself. For the first time, his dream wasn't just about building a better life for his mom and himself. It was about creating something bigger, something that could lift up the entire community. Jimmy's idea to form a team quickly gained momentum. With Ellie by his side, they recruited a handful of kids from the neighborhood, friends, classmates, and even a few older kids who were curious about what Jimmy was doing. Each person brought a unique strength. One was great at organizing, another had a knack for fixing things, and one girl, Rosa, had an incredible talent for drawing, which she used to design new flyers for their growing initiative. Jimmy dubbed the group the Problem Solvers, and their reputation began to spread. Requests poured in from neighbors and local shop owners. A struggling florist needed help advertising her shop. A retired veteran wanted advice on how to turn his woodworking hobby into a small business. The problem solvers tackled every challenge with creativity and enthusiasm, often working late into the evening to brainstorm and implement solutions. It wasn't long before the team's work began making a noticeable impact. Mrs. Harper's candle business thrived thanks to her new loyal customer program. Mr. Reyes not only struck a deal with the laundromat owner, but also brought in new clients, allowing him to hire an assistant. The community was buzzing with excitement, and Jimmy felt a sense of pride unlike anything he'd ever experienced. One afternoon, while the team was gathered in Jimmy's garage, now their unofficial headquarters, Ellie handed him a stack of letters. What's this? Jimmy asked, flipping through the papers. Ellie grinned. Letters from people who've heard about us. They want to thank us, or ask for our help. It's like we're becoming a real business or something. Jimmy laughed, but a pang of disbelief struck him. Just weeks ago, he'd been a kid wandering the park unsure of his future. Now he was leading something that felt bigger than himself. The next Saturday, Jimmy stood in Whitmore's office, this time with a binder full of letters, photos, and examples of the problem solver's work. Whitmore took his time going through the materials, occasionally glancing at Jimmy with an impressed expression. This is remarkable, Whitmore said finally, closing the binder. You've built something real, Jimmy. Something that's making a difference. Jimmy's chest swelled with pride, but Whitmore's next words caught him off guard. So what's next? Jimmy hesitated. I guess we just keep helping people. Whitmore shook his head, a small smile on his lips. That's part of it, but real success is about creating something that lasts. If you left tomorrow, would the problem solvers continue without you? The question hit Jimmy like a brick. He hadn't considered that. The team relied on him to organize everything, but he hadn't thought about what would happen if he couldn't be there. I don't know, Jimmy admitted. Whitmore nodded. That's your next challenge. Build something sustainable. Teach your team how to lead, how to make decisions without you. If you succeed, you won't just be solving problems. You'll be creating opportunities for others to grow. Jimmy shared Whitmore's advice with the team during their next meeting. At first, the idea of delegating responsibility felt strange. Jimmy had grown so used to being the leader that stepping back seemed risky. But as the weeks went on, something incredible happened. Ellie became the team's spokesperson, handling communication and pitching ideas to clients. Rosa developed a system for tracking projects and deadlines. Others stepped up to take charge of specific tasks, bringing their own unique talents to the table. By the time Jimmy visited Whitmore again, the problem solvers were running more smoothly than ever. You've done it, Whitmore said with a rare smile. You've built something that can stand on its own. That's how legacies are made, Jimmy. Jimmy couldn't help but smile. For the first time, he felt like he was on equal footing with the man who had become his mentor. As the problem solvers grew, so did their impact. Local news outlets began featuring stories about the group, and soon, people from other neighborhoods reached out, asking how they could start their own problem solvers teams. Jimmy worked tirelessly to create a guide, sharing everything he'd learned to help others replicate their success. One evening, as he sat with his mom in their tiny garage-turned-headquarters, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Jimmy," she said, her voice full of emotion. "You've done something incredible, not just for us but for everyone." Jimmy smiled, tears prickling at his eyes. "I couldn't have done it without everyone's help." Whitmore invited Jimmy and the problem solvers to a special event at Whitmore Corporation, an awards ceremony recognizing local leaders. Standing on stage, surrounded by his team and a crowd of supporters, Jimmy looked out at the audience and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "None of this would have been possible without the people around me," Jimmy said into the microphone. "They believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. This isn't just my story, it's our story. And it's just the beginning." The crowd erupted into applause, and Jimmy caught Whitmore's eye in the front row. The older man gave him a nod of approval, a silent acknowledgement of how far he'd come. Jimmy knew he still had a long way to go, but for the first time in his life, he felt like the future was his to shape. Years passed, but the story of the problem solvers didn't fade, it grew. What had started as a neighborhood initiative blossomed into a national movement. Across cities and towns, new teams of young people embraced the same mission Jimmy had started: solving problems, building connections, and transforming their communities. Jimmy, now in his early 20s, stood in the middle of the bustling problem solvers' headquarters. The garage that had once been their base of operations had been replaced by a modest office downtown, funded by local sponsors and supporters. The walls were lined with photos of the original team: Jimmy, Ellie, Rosa, and the others, alongside snapshots of the lives they'd touched over the years. Ellie entered the room, now the official director of operations. She carried a clipboard, her usual no-nonsense attitude tempered by a grin. "Big news," she said, handing Jimmy a letter. Jimmy unfolded it and scanned the contents, his eyes widening. "No way." Ellie laughed. "Way. They want you to speak at the National Youth Leadership Summit next month. Looks like the world's finally catching on to what I've always known. You're a big deal." Jimmy shook his head, still in disbelief. "This isn't about me, Ellie. It's about all of us. And it's about Whitmore." The summit was held in a massive auditorium, packed with young leaders, educators, and business people. Jimmy stood backstage, nerves dancing in his stomach. Ellie, ever his anchor, patted his shoulder. "You've got this," she said. "Just tell them your story." When Jimmy stepped onto the stage, the applause was deafening. He took a moment to gather himself, looking out at the sea of faces before beginning. "I was just a kid when this all started," Jimmy said, his voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. "I didn't have much, not money, not connections, not even a plan. But I had an idea. And thanks to the people who believed in me, that idea grew into something bigger than I ever imagined." He went on to share how Michael Whitmore's mentorship had shaped his journey, teaching him not just about success, but about resilience, collaboration, and the power of giving back. "Whitmore taught me one thing that changed everything," Jimmy continued. "Success isn't about what you get, it's about what you give." The problem solvers were never about making money or being famous. It was about seeing people, hearing them, and helping them in ways that truly matter. And the truth is, anyone can do that. The audience erupted in applause as Jimmy stepped back from the microphone, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Later that evening, Jimmy received a phone call from Whitmore himself. "I watched your speech," Whitmore said, his voice as steady and composed as ever. "You've come a long way, Jimmy." Jimmy smiled. "I had a good teacher." Whitmore chuckled. "You had potential. All I did was help you see it. Now it's your turn to pass that on. Keep building, Jimmy. Keep inspiring." "I will," Jimmy promised. The problem solvers expanded internationally in the years that followed, with Jimmy and his team creating programs to train young leaders in problem solving, teamwork, and community building. Their efforts transformed not just neighborhoods but entire cities, proving that even the smallest ideas could spark the biggest changes. Standing outside the new Problem Solvers Community Center, a state-of-the-art facility built to serve underprivileged youth, Jimmy reflected on how far they'd come. Ellie stood beside him, holding a plaque with the words, "In memory of Michael Whitmore," engraved at the top. "Think he'd be proud?" Ellie asked. Jimmy nodded, a bittersweet smile on his face. I think he'd say we're just getting started. As they unveiled the plaque to the cheering crowd, Jimmy felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step. And so the legacy of the problem solvers continued, a testament to the power of determination, kindness, and the belief that even one small idea could change the world.